This road is incredibly busy, so I'll have to be quick. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another story. So, it's the 7th of July 1817, and Elizabeth Sheppard is returning from her walk to find employment in Mansfield down there. And she is coming back in the direction I am coming from. And Charles Rotherham is coming the other way, and Elizabeth is brutally murdered, which I will go into, unfortunately. And she was thrown and chucked in the ditch down here, and she is still remembered by this memorial stone. The stone reads, "This stone is erected to the memory of Elizabeth Sheppard of Papplewick, who was murdered when passing this spot by Charles Rotherham, July the 7th, 1817, aged 17 years. Now this road, we have a bit of respite, but I will tell the story in the forest, as it is incredibly busy. The story is shrouded in folklore, legend, the paranormal, and a potential miscarriage of justice. So, I hope you enjoy. Please like and subscribe. Well, good morning, everybody. I was hoping to do this story from the memorial stone, but it is just too busy for me. I can't hear myself think. It is just over there. Now, in this story, I will talk about ghosts, I will talk about potential miscarriages of justice, I will talk about legend and folklore. What is important to know, the only thing that is factual is a young girl at the beginning of life was brutally murdered at that spot there. And as barbaric as 19th century England sounds, these things still go on. What is wrong with us? So Elizabeth Sheppard was Bessie, as he was known, and as I will refer to her in the story. As I said, she was wearing her Sunday best, and she'd been to Mansfield, she'd walked the 7 miles and was successful in her mission of getting a job. Now, on the other side of the Mansfield Road was Charles Rotherham, who was a Napoleonic War veteran who was working in this area as a scissor sharpener, which I appreciate I cannot say very well. Now, Charles was coming from that way. You probably can't see the road, you can only see a forest. And Bessie was coming from that way. And the story is they encountered each other. Charles brutally murdered Bessie and chucked her in the ditch. He rifled through her belongings, and when she didn't have any money, he took her shoes and he took her umbrella. Now, back at Bessie's home, Bessie's mother, as evening drew, started to worry about Bessie, and she went out to find her. En route, she passed an unidentified man, a man who would later be identified as Charles Rotherham. 1817 England. You can't imagine that police work was too efficient. But Charles Rotherham was seen in nearby Redhill, where he was drinking and singing songs and trying to sell the shoes of Bessie. Now, if Bessie's mother had passed Charles Rotherham, did he not have the umbrella on him? And he went straight back to drinking. This crime was brutal. Was he not covered in blood? If you do want to know more about the theories of it being a miscarriage of justice, a David Marshall wrote a book on the case. He is like the knowledge on this case. He spent 40 years researching it, and I'll put a little picture of his book if this does grab your interest of the case. It's a minefield of information to get involved in. Also, while I'm talking about local people, Richard Morley, who's often found on the discussions about this case, he maintains the stone, so well done Richard, keeping folklore stories and legends, and more importantly the memory of Bessie, alive. Now, when Charles Rotherham was caught, he was on his way to Loughborough. He was said to be overlooking a bridge down into the river. He said, "I am guilty of this crime, and I, of course, must suffer the law." Now, this case became huge news at the time, and two reasons potentially this was the case was, one, she was a very young girl, and age shouldn't matter in murder, but it does. The younger, the more heinous it is seen to be, and the more it is covered by the press, and that still continues to this day, I believe. But also the papers at the time went into some grave detail about the murder, and I will read the paper at the time. When the body was found, it was in a dreadful state. The brains had protruded from the skull, and one eye had been knocked out of the socket and rested on her cheek. He pleaded guilty, but for some unknown reason the judge convinced him to change his plea to not guilty. But he was sentenced of the crime, and on the 28th of July of 1817, 20,000 people gathered to see Charles Rotherham hung in the gallows at Nottingham. So, just a quick take on the infamous murder of Elizabeth Sheppard. It happened just over there, marked by the memorial stone, which was paid for by the people of Mansfield. Now, the case, shrouded with mystery and controversy. Again, there's a book you can read by David Marshall, who went into huge detail. He spent 40 years researching it, so if you want to know more about it, you can. As you know, with this channel I do like a good ghost tale, and of course such a tragic event is marred with its own tales of the paranormal, which I will briefly go into. Now, it said, if you're trying to find the stone, be careful, because if it is disturbed, it is said that a ghostly figure will appear. It is said in the 1930s, when the road was widened and the stone was put back, there was lots of sightings of the ghostly figure of a young lady. If you go on all the old discussion groups of this case, lots of people give their own ghost stories. it was said a car hit the memorial stone about in the 1950s, and lots more ghostly sightings were seen again. Now, I mentioned Richard on this before, and he is fairly confident the stone's never been moved, it's still there. So that's that kind of ghost story, potentially anyway. And the best story is that in 1988, Bessie, her headstone had been removed from the church, and the police stood by the stone to take a picture for the local media to raise awareness. And once he touched the stone, he had a strong urge to go to one point in the church, and sure enough, that's where the headstone was, and it was found. Again, by all accounts, there was never a headstone for Bessie, and maybe that's why the memorial stone was put there as a way of showing respect to her. She was buried in an unmarked grave, and I can't find any of these pictures of the police stood there for the local media. So I'm not sure about that one, but it is shrouded in its own controversy and mystery. But again, as I said at the start, the one thing about all this that can't be lost, lots of stories and folklore and legends, but a young lady was brutally murdered at that site, and things like that still go on today, and it's as tragic now as it is then. So it was a real person with a real story, just like you and me. There are quite a lot of memorial stones around Britain for murders, and I'll try and show you a few over the course of my time on this channel. I thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. All the very best. Morning.
Morning.
Hiya. People on the road, people in the forest. I can't get any peace. I'll see you soon for the next one. Take care, bye.